At my family gathering, my daughter whispered, "Don't let her near the baby. She's dangerous." She had forgotten who paid for the house and the child's health insurance. The words hung in the air like poison. I froze, my hand still clutching the glass of lemonade I'd been about to sip. Surely I had misheard. My daughter Mia couldn't possibly have said that about me, her own mother. But she had. I watched as she leaned into her husband David's ear, her lips moving urgently, her eyes darting nervously in my direction. "Mom's been acting strange lately. Just keep Noah away from her until we leave." I stood rooted to the spot, hidden by the kitchen doorway, invisible to them but close enough to hear every syllable. The backyard was filled with family. My sister Ellen and her husband, cousins I rarely saw, and neighbors who had become like family over the years. Everyone had come to celebrate Noah's 3rd birthday. My only grandson. The light of my life. The glass trembled in my hand. At 59 I thought I understood pain. The crushing grief when my husband left us for his 20-something secretary when Mia was just 7. The years of working 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. The endless nights spent wondering if I was doing enough as a single mother. But this was different. This cut deeper than anything I'd ever felt before. I took a deep breath and stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, needing a moment to compose myself. My mind raced through the past few months, searching for anything I might have done to make Mia think I was dangerous to my own grandson. Nothing. There was absolutely nothing. What made it worse was that just last month, I'd paid off the remainder of their mortgage. A gift I could finally afford after years of careful saving. "Mom, you're an angel," Mia had said, hugging me tight. "Noah is so lucky to have you in his life." And the health insurance. When David's company cut back on benefits, I'd stepped in without hesitation, covering Noah's premium plan that allowed him to see the pediatric specialists he needed for his mild asthma. I'd given everything to my daughter. My time, my money, my unconditional love. And now she was treating me like some kind of threat. Gathering what dignity I could muster, I walked back into the yard, plastering a smile on my face that felt like it might crack my cheeks. Noah spotted me immediately, breaking into a toddler run. "Gamma! Up!" he demanded, arms raised. I bent down to scoop him up, and that's when I saw it. The flash of panic in Mia's eyes as she rushed forward. "Noah, honey, come help mommy with the cake," she said, her voice falsely bright as she intercepted him, shooting me an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I was just going to give him his gift," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Later, Mom. He's too excited right now." Throughout the entire party, she kept him at a distance. When I approached, she'd find a reason to move him elsewhere. When I offered to help him with his food, David mysteriously appeared to take over. It was subtle enough that perhaps no one else noticed, but to me it was as glaring as neon signs. By the time the last guest left, I felt hollow. Empty. My sister Ellen squeezed my hand as she departed, whispering, "Are you okay? You seem off today." I just nodded, unable to form words around the lump in my throat. Alone in the kitchen with Mia as she wrapped leftover cake, I finally found my voice. "Did I do something wrong?" I asked, hating how small I sounded. Mia turned, her face a perfect mask of confusion. "What are you talking about?" "With Noah. You've been keeping him away from me all day." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Don't be silly, Mom. You're imagining things." The denial hurt worse than the original words I'd overheard. At least those had been honest. As I drove home that night to my empty house, the same house where I'd raised Mia alone, tears finally came. Not gentle tears of sadness but harsh, racking sobs that made it hard to see the road. What had I done to deserve this? And more importantly, what was I going to do now? Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying Mia's whispered words over and over. "She's dangerous." The look of fear in her eyes when Noah ran toward me. The careful way she'd kept him at a distance all day. By morning, my sadness had hardened into something else. A determination to understand what was happening. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, the same oak table where I'd helped Mia with homework for years. The morning light streamed through windows I'd washed countless times, illuminating a home that suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. My gaze fell on the photo album on the bookshelf. I pulled it down, dust dancing in the sunbeams as I opened it. There we were, Mia and me. A journey captured in faded photographs. There she was at 7, gap-toothed and brave, just weeks after her father walked out. I remembered how I'd found her crying that night, convinced it was somehow her fault. Daddy said he needed space to breathe, she'd sobbed. I'd held her close, promising that we would be okay, even as I wondered how I'd pay next month's mortgage. I turned the page. Mia at 12, holding up a science fair ribbon. What the photo didn't show was how I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. helping her finish that project after working a double shift at the hospital. I was a nurse by day, waitress by night. Exhausted but determined that my daughter would have every opportunity. Another page. Her high school graduation. Me beaming with pride, hiding the fact that I'd just refinanced the house to afford her college tuition. I never told her about the second mortgage or the credit card debt. Why burden her? That was my job as a mother, to carry the weight so she could soar. I closed the album, my coffee now cold. These memories weren't helping. They only deepened the mystery of why my daughter now saw me as a threat. My phone buzzed with a text from Ellen. Lunch today. An hour later we sat at our favorite cafe. Ellen, 3 years my senior, had always been my anchor. She knew everything, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the dreams I'd put on hold. She said, "What?" Ellen nearly choked on her iced tea when I told her what I'd overheard. That I'm dangerous. That Noah shouldn't be near me. Ellen shook her head in disbelief. That's absurd. You're the most devoted grandmother I've ever seen. Something's wrong, Ellen. I just don't know what. My sister studied me thoughtfully. When did you first notice her acting differently? I considered the question. Maybe 3 months ago? She started making excuses when I offered to babysit. She used to jump at the chance for free childcare. And you've never given her any reason to worry about Noah's safety? Of course not. I was offended she'd even ask. I was a pediatric nurse for 30 years. I probably know more about child safety than both of them combined. Ellen nodded, accepting this. What about David? Could he be behind this? The thought had crossed my mind. My son-in-law had always been polite but distant. I recalled how 8 years ago, when Mia first brought him home, I'd had reservations. Not because he wasn't kind, he was, but something about him felt calculating. When they got engaged, I'd put aside my concerns. When they struggled to find a home, I'd offered to help with the down payment. When they couldn't afford the mortgage in that upscale neighborhood David insisted on, I'd stepped in again and again. Maybe, I admitted. But Mia's always had a mind of her own. She wouldn't just go along with something like this unless she believed it too. Ellen reached across the table and took my hand. Have you tried asking her directly? She denied it. Told me I was imagining things. And the house payment? The health insurance? I sighed. I don't want to use that as leverage, Ellen. I help them because I love them, not to control them. I know that. But they should know it too. As we parted ways, Ellen hugged me tightly. Don't let this fester, Mel. Confront them. Find out what's really going on. That evening, I drove past Mia's house. The beautiful colonial with the wraparound porch that I'd helped make possible. Lights glowed warmly in the windows. I imagined Noah inside, perhaps getting ready for bed, listening to a story. My grandson, who I wasn't allowed to hold. I didn't stop. Not yet. First, I needed to understand what I was up against. As I turned the corner, my phone buzzed. A text from Mia. Mom, we need to talk. Can you come over tomorrow night? After Noah's in bed. My heart raced. Maybe she regretted what she'd said. Maybe there was an explanation that would make sense of all this. Or maybe a small voice whispered, things were about to get much worse. I barely slept that night, my mind churning with possibilities of what Mia wanted to discuss. By morning, I'd cycled through hope and dread a dozen times. I tried to occupy myself with mundane tasks, laundry, grocery shopping, balancing my checkbook, anything to keep my hands busy and my thoughts from spiraling. The day crept by with excruciating slowness. At 7:30 p.m., I pulled into Mia's driveway. My stomach knotted with anxiety. I dressed carefully in the soft blue sweater Mia had given me last Christmas, a small, perhaps pathetic attempt to remind her of happier times between us. David answered the door, his expression unreadable. Melissa, he said with a nod. No, Mom. No hug, just my name, formal as a business greeting. Mia's in the living room. I followed him through the entryway, past the family photos lining the wall, including several of me with Noah as a newborn, my face radiant with grandmother joy. How quickly things had changed. Mia sat on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked up when I entered, and I was struck by the dark circles under her eyes. "Mom," she said, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks for coming." I sat in the armchair across from her, noticing how David positioned himself beside Mia, almost protectively. "You said we needed to talk," I prompted when neither of them spoke. Mia exchanged a glance with David before beginning. "Mom, we're concerned about some changes we've noticed in you lately." I blinked, genuinely confused. "Changes? What kind of changes?" "You've been forgetful," she said. "More than usual. And sometimes you say things that don't make sense." "What are you talking about?" "I don't." "Last month," David interjected, "you couldn't remember where you parked at the mall. We walked around for almost an hour." I almost laughed. "That's your evidence? Who hasn't forgotten where they parked?" "It's not just that," Mia continued. "You left the stove on when you were watching Noah. And you mixed up his medication dosage." I felt like I'd been slapped. "That's absolutely not true. I've never mixed up Noah's medication. I was a pediatric nurse for 30 years. "Mom," Mia's voice softened with what sounded like rehearsed concern. "This is exactly what we're worried about. You get defensive when we try to talk about these episodes. Dr. Harmon thinks it might be early-onset dementia." "Dr. Harmon?" I echoed, stunned. "You discuss me with your doctor?" "We're worried about you," David said, his tone maddeningly reasonable. "And about Noah's safety when he's with you." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. They weren't just keeping Noah from me, they were building a case. A case that I was mentally deteriorating and unfit to be alone with my grandson. "This is ridiculous," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I don't have dementia. I've never left the stove on with Noah here. And I certainly never mishandled his medication." Mia looked at David, that same conspiratorial glance that made my blood boil. "Mom, we think you should see someone. Get evaluated." I stood up, my legs shaking with anger and disbelief. "I don't need to be evaluated. What I need is for you to stop spreading lies about me." "See," David murmured to Mia. "This denial is part of the pattern." I turned to him, no longer bothering to hide my fury. "Don't you dare psychoanalyze me in my daughter's home. A home, may I remind you both, that I helped you buy. That I'm still helping you pay for." Mia's face hardened. And there it is. The financial control. I felt like I was drowning, struggling for air in a sea of accusations that made no sense. "I brought it up because you're treating me like I'm crazy and dangerous, while happily accepting my support." "We're trying to help you," Mia insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "Why can't you see that?" "Help me?" I laughed bitterly. "By inventing symptoms I don't have? By keeping my grandson from me? That's not help, Mia. That's cruelty." I grabbed my purse, needing to escape before I said something truly unforgivable. At the doorway I turned back. "I want you to know something. I've never once forgotten where I was or what I was doing when it comes to Noah. Not once. He is precious to me, and I would never, ever put him at risk." "Mom," Mia started, but I cut her off. "No. I'm done being accused. When you're ready to tell me what's really going on here, call me." As I drove home, tears blurred my vision. I pulled over, unable to continue, and let the sobs rack my body. I couldn't understand what was happening. Why would my own daughter fabricate such horrible lies about me? My phone rang. Ellen. With trembling fingers I answered. "Mel? How did it go?" Her voice was laced with concern. "They think I have dementia," I whispered, the words sounding absurd even as I said them. "Or they're pretending to think that. They're telling people I'm dangerous to Noah." Ellen's silence spoke volumes. Finally she said, "You need to come over. Now. There's something you should know." Ellen's house was a sanctuary that night. She poured me a generous glass of wine and sat me down at her kitchen table, her face grave. "I didn't want to tell you this," she began, "because I hoped I was wrong. But after what you've just told me." She disappeared into her home office and returned with a folded piece of paper. "Mia called me last week, asking if I'd noticed any changes in your behavior. She mentioned the same things: forgetfulness, confusion. She wanted to know if I would support having you evaluated. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. It was an email printed out from Mia to several family members. The subject line read, "Concerned about mom, please read." The message detailed my supposed symptoms, incidents I had no recollection of because they had never happened. According to Mia, I had gotten lost driving to her house. I had left Noah unattended in the bathtub. I had given him adult cough syrup instead of children's medicine. Lies. All of them absolute lies. She sent this to everyone? My voice sounded strange, hollow. Ellen nodded grimly. Cousin Janet forwarded it to me, concerned. Most of the family thinks you're in cognitive decline, Mel. I felt physically ill. But why? Why would she do this? Ellen reached across the table and took my hand. I've been doing some digging. David lost his job 3 months ago. I stared at her, the implications slowly dawning. They never told me. No, they didn't. And now they're struggling financially, even with your help. Janet mentioned that Mia was asking if anyone knew about the terms of your will. The room seemed to tilt. My will? They're after my money. I think they're scared, Mel. Scared of losing the lifestyle they've become accustomed to. The house, the vacations, the private preschool for Noah. So instead of asking for help, they're painting me as mentally incompetent? The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. What's the endgame here? To have me declared incompetent so they can control my assets? Ellen didn't need to answer. We both knew that was exactly the plan. I sat in stunned silence, processing this revelation. My own daughter conspiring to strip me of my dignity, my autonomy, my relationship with my grandson, all for money. What are you going to do? Ellen asked finally. I drained my wine glass, a cold clarity replacing the hurt. I'm going to fight back. The next morning I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my doctor, scheduling a complete cognitive assessment. The second was to my attorney, updating my will and power of attorney documents. And the third was to a locksmith. By afternoon, I had a clean bill of cognitive health from Dr. Patterson, who had known me for 15 years. I had new estate documents that specifically prevented Mia or David from having any control over my affairs. And I had new locks on all my doors. When Mia called that evening, her voice was syrupy with fake concern. Mom, I hope you're not upset about our talk. We only want what's best for you. I've been thinking about what you said, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. You're right that we need to talk about the future. Oh, I could hear the surprise, then the calculation in her pause. We could come over tomorrow. David's parents can watch Noah. No, I said firmly. I'll come to you. And I want Noah there. She began to protest, but I cut her off. Either Noah is there or I don't come. Your choice, Mia. The following evening, I arrived at their house with a leather portfolio tucked under my arm. Noah ran to me the moment I entered, and this time Mia didn't intercept him. I scooped him up, breathing in his sweet toddler scent, fighting tears. Gamma missed you, I whispered, pressing a kiss to his curls. Miss you too, he replied, patting my cheek with sticky fingers. Play trucks. In a little bit, sweetie. Gamma needs to talk to mommy and daddy first. I set him down in the playroom adjoining the living room, where he could be seen but not hear adult conversation. Then I faced Mia and David, removing the documents from my portfolio. I saw Dr. Patterson yesterday, I began, sliding the medical report across the coffee table. As you can see, I have no cognitive impairment whatsoever. David barely glanced at it. Mia's face flushed. Mom, one doctor's opinion isn't enough? Fine. I'm happy to see any specialist you want. But first, let's be honest about what's really happening here. I placed a printout of Mia's email on the table. You've been systematically turning our family against me with lies. The question is why? Mia's eyes widened in panic. David shifted uncomfortably. Ellen told me about the job, David. I looked directly at him. Why didn't you come to me? I would have helped. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken truths. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I've updated my will. I've changed the locks on my house. And I've spoken to my attorney about grandparents' rights in case you try to keep Noah from me again. I slid one final document across the table, a statement from my bank. I'm also withdrawing my financial support. The mortgage assistance, the health insurance premiums, all of it, ends today. Mia gasped. You can't do that. I can and I am. Unless. Unless what? David demanded, speaking for the first time. Unless you both agree to family counseling. Unless you publicly retract the lies you've told about my mental health. And unless you guarantee in writing that I have regular, unsupervised visits with my grandson. I stood up, summoning every ounce of dignity I possessed. You have 24 hours to decide. Choose wisely. As I turned to leave, Noah ran from the playroom, wrapping his arms around my legs. No go, Gamma. I knelt down, looking into his innocent eyes so like Mia's when she was young. Gamma has to go now, but I'll see you very soon. I promise. Over his head I met Mia's gaze. For the first time I saw something there beyond calculation or deceit, fear. Real fear. Good, I thought, gathering my things. Let her be afraid. Let her understand what it feels like to have everything you love threatened. The ultimatum had been delivered. Now I had to be strong enough to follow through no matter what they decided. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I barely slept, jumping at every phone notification, both dreading and hoping for Mia's response. I occupied myself with mindless tasks, reorganizing my linen closet, scrubbing the kitchen floor. Anything to keep moving, to silence the thoughts screaming inside my head. Had I gone too far? Was I using money as a weapon just as Mia had accused? The questions gnawed at me, but I kept returning to the same truth. They had tried to destroy me. Not just my relationship with Noah, but my reputation, my autonomy, my dignity. Ellen called twice, checking on me. Stay strong, she urged. You're not asking for anything unreasonable. At the 23rd hour my phone rang. Mia's name flashed on the screen. We'll do it, she said without preamble, her voice tight. The counseling. Everything. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by caution. I need more than words, Mia. I know. She sounded defeated. The first appointment is scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. with Dr. Levine. She's supposed to be the best family therapist in the city. I was surprised by her initiative. Thank you for setting that up. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, Mia spoke again, her voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. Are you really cutting us off? I closed my eyes, steadying myself. I've already stopped the automatic payments. But I'm not abandoning Noah. His college fund remains untouched, and his health insurance will continue. Another pause. And the mortgage? That depends on how serious you are about fixing this, Mia. I won't be manipulated or lied about ever again. She agreed quietly, and we finalized details for Thursday's appointment. As I hung up, I felt hollow rather than victorious. There was no joy in strong-arming my own daughter, even if it was necessary. Thursday arrived with gloomy skies that matched my mood. The therapy office was in a converted Victorian house, warm and inviting despite the gravity of why we were there. Dr. Levine was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. I understand we're dealing with some significant trust issues, she began after introductions. Who would like to start? Mia and David exchanged glances. Neither spoke. I will, I said finally. I recounted discovering their whispers about me, finding the email to family members, and realizing they were trying to paint me as mentally incompetent. Dr. Levine turned to Mia. Would you like to respond to your mother's perception of events? Mia twisted her wedding ring nervously. It wasn't like that. We were genuinely concerned. Based on what evidence? Dr. Levine asked. Mom has been more forgetful. She's been acting differently. How so specifically? Mia fumbled, her examples vague and unconvincing even to my ears. Dr. Levine pressed gently but firmly, and as the session progressed, the truth began to emerge in fragments. We're drowning, Mia finally admitted, tears streaming down her face. David lost his job. The mortgage is underwater. Noah's preschool costs a fortune. We were scared. Of asking me for help? I interjected, my heart breaking despite my anger. I've always helped you, Mia. Always. But you control everything, she cried. Every gift comes with strings. Her words stung like a physical blow. What strings? Name one time I've used money to control you. You always have opinions about everything, how we raise Noah, where we vacation, what we spend on. If we disagree, you get that look like we're disappointing you. I wanted to argue to defend myself, but Dr. Levine intervened. Mia, expressing opinions isn't the same as control. Did your mother ever explicitly threaten to withdraw support if you didn't comply with her wishes? Mia hesitated, then reluctantly shook her head. And Melissa, Dr. Levine turned to me. Can you understand how financial dependency might create a power imbalance? I hadn't considered it that way before. Had my generosity inadvertently created resentment? Had I been too quick with advice, too invested in their decisions? I never meant to control you, I said softly to Mia. I just wanted to help, to be part of your lives. But it's suffocating, Mia burst out. And then when Noah was born, it got worse. You're always there, always watching, always judging. Judging? I echoed, genuinely confused. I think you're a wonderful mother. Mia looked up, surprise evident through her tears. You do. Of course I do. Noah's thriving. He's happy, curious, secure. Everything a child should be. For the first time I glimpsed the real wound beneath all this deception. Mia wasn't just afraid of losing my financial support. She was afraid of losing my approval. Somewhere along the way, my daughter had begun to see my help not as love but as a measuring stick she could never quite match. David, who had been mostly silent, finally spoke. We shouldn't have lied about your memory about anything. But we were desperate. I felt like a failure, unable to provide for my family. Dr. Levine nodded thoughtfully. It sounds like we have several layers to work through here. Financial dependency, communication breakdowns, fears about adequacy as parents and providers. She looked at each of us in turn. This won't be resolved in one session. Are you all committed to continuing this work? I thought about Noah, about the decades of history with Mia, about the family we could still be. Yes, I said firmly. Whatever it takes. Mia and David nodded, more hesitantly but sincerely. As we left the session, Mia touched my arm. The first voluntary contact since this nightmare began. Mom, she said quietly. I'm sorry. Not for everything, not yet. But for the lies. That was unforgivable. It wasn't enough. Not nearly. But it was a start. The healing wasn't quick or easy. Through winter into spring, we attended weekly sessions with Dr. Levine, slowly unraveling decades of complicated emotions. There were sessions where we left in tears. Others where tiny breakthroughs gave me hope that something better waited on the other side of this pain. Gradually, the truth emerged in its entirety. David hadn't just lost his job. He'd been gambling, trying to supplement their income, digging them deeper into debt. Mia had been covering for him, terrified that I would judge them both. The dementia story had been their desperate attempt to gain control of my finances without having to admit their mistakes. I was so ashamed. Mia confessed during one particularly raw session. You've always been so responsible, so perfect with money. I couldn't bear to tell you how badly we'd messed up. Perfect. I'd echoed, surprised. Mia, I made so many financial mistakes when you were growing up. I just shielded you from them. That moment marked a turning point. Mia began to see me not as an infallible matriarch, but as a woman who had struggled and stumbled, just as she was doing now. I made changes too. I recognized how my financial support, while well-intentioned, had created an unhealthy dependency. Instead of simply paying their bills, I worked with them to create a debt repayment plan. I offered to watch Noah 2 days a week so Mia could return to work part-time. I connected David with my former colleague's husband, who was hiring at his construction company. But the most important change had nothing to do with money. I started rebuilding my own life beyond my role as mother and grandmother. For years, I'd centered my world around Mia and then Noah, neglecting friendships and interests of my own. Now I joined a book club. I signed up for a watercolor class I'd been eyeing for years. I reconnected with former nursing colleagues for monthly dinners. Ellen noticed the difference immediately. You're glowing, she remarked one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on my back porch. I haven't seen you this vibrant in years. I feel lighter, I admitted. Like I can finally breathe. Because things are better with Mia? Partly. But also because I'm not making her and Noah responsible for my happiness anymore. By summer, we had established a new normal. Mia and David were slowly climbing out of debt. I visited Noah regularly, but no longer felt I needed to be involved in every decision. The lies had been retracted. Mia had personally called each family member to correct the record about my mental health. Trust was rebuilding, fragile but real. On a warm July afternoon, I was tending to my newly planted garden when a car pulled into my driveway. Mia stepped out, Noah's hand in hers. "Surprise visit," she called, smiling tentatively. "Is that okay?" "More than okay," I said, setting aside my gardening gloves. Noah broke free and raced toward me. "Gamma, we brought picnic." I scooped him up, savoring his solid little body against mine, no longer taking these moments for granted. Mia approached more slowly, carrying a wicker basket. "We thought we could eat in the backyard. If you're not too busy." "I'm never too busy for this," I said honestly. We spread a blanket under the old oak tree, unpacking sandwiches and fruit. Noah chattered excitedly about preschool and his new obsession with dinosaurs. After eating, he wandered off to explore my garden, staying within sight but giving Mia and me a moment alone. "He misses you," she said quietly. "Even with our regular visits, it's not the same as before." I nodded, unsure where she was going with this. "David and I have been talking," she continued, nervously pleating the edge of the blanket. I think, it would be good for Noah to spend more time with you. Maybe a sleepover once a week." Emotion welled in my throat. "I'd love that. And there's something else." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "It's Noah's birthday next month. We want to have it here at your house." Inside the envelope was a handmade invitation, clearly crafted by Noah's sticky fingers, decorated with dinosaur stickers and wobbly letters.